Greetings and welcome back once again. This is Imuna. I pray everybody is doing well. Welcome back to the channel. We're going to get into this right away because I don't have long today. I enjoyed and I hope you enjoyed just reading. It's been a while. Um, and don't worry, we'll get back to the Marvin Gaye conversation. But reading the narratives and the experiences of those who came before us. And so I wanted to follow up last week's um, conversation with another conversation, just so that we could continue as we continue having these discussions in public about the nature of this person and the nature of that person, that we could kind of get some more real life information, more data into the equation so that we're just not recycling the same old. You feel me? If I could be heard, let me know. Peace to everyone who's just entered. I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to jump right into this for the sake of time. Today is entering into the rest day, and y'all already know how I do it. So let me go over here, move this screen here, and we're going to read it together. I just perused. What's going on, John? I just perused the beginning of it. I didn't read the fullness, so we're going to read the fullness together, and I'm going to do my live reaction. Okay. All right. So this one is about. Oh, let me go back. Let me. Nope. Yeah, let me do it like that. So let me go back. The name of this woman is. She's telling about her experience similar to last week. And let's see what we're going to learn this week, shall we? Louisa Adams, that's her name. All right, let's go. All right, my name is Louisa Adams. I was born in Rockingham, Richmond County, North Carolina. I was 8 years old when the Yankees came through. And I think there was a series of questions that I read at another time that they asked everybody. And so you're going to see similar answers, right? I belong to Master Tom A. Covington Sr. My mother was named Esther or Easter, and my father's name was Jacob. We were all Covingtons. Again, so sometimes when you're looking for this, they may not be brother and sister, but if they belong to the same employer, so to say, or master, right? I use the term employer loosely, they're going to have the same name. No, sir, I don't know where my mother and father came from. Solomon was brother number one, then Luke, Josh, Stephen, Ashbury. So how many children is that so far? One, two, three, four, five. Five brothers. Sisters were Jane, Frances, Wincy, and I was next. So it sounds like she's the baby. So one, two, three, four, five, and then six, seven, eight, and she was the ninth one. I remember's grandmother, she was named Lovey Wall. They brought her here from same place. My aunts were named, one was Nicey and one was Jane. Now we know Nicey's name probably wasn't Nicey, but that's what she remembers, right? I picked feed for the white folks. So she's telling you her job at 8 years old. She had a job. They sent many of the children to work at the salt mines where we went to get salt. So again, if you were researching this and if this was, I'm just not just doing this for, oh, let's read it, play plantation tales. If this was your ancestor or you thought this was your ancestor, she's giving a lot of clues like salt mines. She said rock, where was she born? All of these things can give information. Um, Rockingham, Richmond County, North Carolina. So I would look for salt mines around there just to get some information of the layout of the land, right? She goes on to say, so she was working in salt mines. My brother Solomon was sent to the salt mines. Luke looked after the sheep. He knocked down China berries for him. Dad and Mammy and their own had their own gardens and hogs. There's some storylines about certain masters. What we need to understand when we talk about slavery, to put it all in one box does a disservice. And the reason it does a disservice because each employer had their own culture, their own company. I'm using these terms loosely. Company culture. So when we say all employers did this or all employers again loosely did that, slave masters, it's not historically accurate. So in her narrative, her employers or slave masters allowed for And sometimes they allowed the enslaved to have their own gardens because they didn't want to be responsible for feeding them, right? So they would have a little plot of land where the master would graciously give them so that they would be responsible for feeding themselves. We were compelled to walk about at night to live. We were so hungry we were bound to steal or perish. I have read this a number of times. This trait seems to be handed down from slavery days. So, just like I said, there were some slave masters who, quote, fed their slaves good, and there were some who wanted to, let's see today, cut corners or increase their profits. And so they didn't give as many, I'm trying to use today's terminology, perks or kickbacks to those who they were working. And so they found a way to save money, so to say, by not feeding people sufficiently. And so what she's talking about is that some would wait till the nighttime to go out and forage and take, because that's how they would survive. So this stereotype of black people stealing, it's coming oftentimes from the institution of slavery and the experience that the so-called slave master had because they were mistreating and abusing the enslaved. Let's continue. They seem to forget that part, but let's continue. This trait seemed to be handed down from slavery. Sometimes I think might be so. So she's in 1930 and she's trying to connect what she's seeing in present day 1930s to what happened then, similar to what I do now. She's like, okay, this is happening now. Where is it coming from? And she's saying, being that she's coming from that time, she thinks it's coming from the enslavement experience, the trauma that happened, the lack, the hunger, the just the position that many people were in. Anyway, our food was bad. Master worked us hard and gave us nothing. That's an equation for somebody taken from the company, ain't it? A little ream of paper, a little markers. You know what I mean? You want a lot, but you don't want to give. We had to use what we made in the garden to eat. We also ate our hogs. Our clothes were bad and beds were sorry. There were some masters who only distributed clothes twice a year. One set of clothes. Let me correct that. One suit of clothes, one which would be for the summertime and one for the winter time. And again, some of them would just give hand me downs or whatever wasn't sufficient. And some wouldn't even clothe children under 12. It really depends. So from what she's describing, who's this master here? Who's this man? Who's this employer? It's just like today when you look for employers who are the reviews of companies to work for. It's the same thing. The only difference is, well, there are many differences. One of which is they were not getting compensated anyway for their pay. Master Tom A. Covington. So this dude was a real slave driver. Okay, let's jump down here. Doo-doo-doo. We went barefooted in a way. What I mean by that is that we had shoes part of the time. We got one pair of shoes a year. Didn't I just say two suits of clothes? Some children under a certain age, they wouldn't even give any shoes, not even a pair of shoes. So you're stealing the person's labor. You're starving them. So when we see that melanated people have a proclivity towards certain things, towards spending their money on certain things, towards using their buying power towards some things, it's coming from a traumatic space. Not just because we want to look good as a people, but because the injury is in the area of very basic things: food, clothes, and shelter. And these are the places, if you look, where a lot of the attention is because the intergenerational injury is in this place, right? When they wore out, we went barefoot. Sometimes we tied them up with strings, and they were so ragged, their tracks looked like bird tracks where we walked in the road. We lived in log houses dabbed with mud. They called them the slave houses. Old Daddy partly raised his chillin' on game. He caught rabbits, coons, and possums. He would work all day and hunt at night. We had no holidays. They did not give us any fun, as I know. So at 8 years old, she's old enough to remember a little something something. And based on what she's remembering, yeah, none of the goodies was going on. What's going on, Judah? Right? Let's see. None of the goodies was going on. Now, I've read about other plantations where this may have not been an experience. And so even people who were living contemporaneously at the same time, they would come to the table and disagree on their experience based on who was their slave master. It says I could eat anything I could get. I tell you the truth, slave time was slave time with us. My brother wore his shoes out and had none all the winter. His feet cracked open and bled so bad you could track him by the blood. When the Yankees came through, he got shoes. So, if we know or if we don't know, there were a lot of melanated people who went to fight with the quote unquote Yankees or the North because of promises of freedom and things of that nature, because of what they already knew from living in the South and being under the institution of slavery. Some was willing to take their chances. I was married in Rockingham. I don't remember when. Mr. Jimmy Covington, a preacher, a white man, married us. I married, so this had to be after enslavement was finished. I married James Adams, who lived on a plantation near Rockingham. I had a nice blue wedding dress. My husband was dressed in kinda light clothes. Best I recollect. She said, recollect. It's been a good long time since then, though. It's interesting in comparison to the one we read last week, how even though she's speaking of the marriage, is she's just moving through the conversation really quickly. I sure do remember Tom Covington and his wife too, Emma. The old man was the very nick. He would take what he made and allow what? He would take what we made and allowance us. That is, allowance it out to many daddy. What is that? What should say? To my daddy after he had made it. My father went to Stephen Covington, Master Tom's brother, and told him about it, and his brother Stephen made him give father his meat back to us. So this master here eh, makes me want to look up who this dude is. He probably got some Covingtons running around here somewhere. My missus was kind to me, but Mars, Tom was the booger. He was a mighty big It was a mighty big plantation. I don't know how many slaves was on it. There were a lot of them, though. There were overseers, two of them. One was named Bob Covington and the other Charles Covington. They were colored men. So he enlisted the labor of his enslaved to govern over the rest. Interesting, so interesting. I rode with them. I rode with them in the carriages sometimes. The carriages had seats that folded up. Bob was overseer in the field and Charles was carriage driver. All the plantation was fenced in, that is all the fields with rails. The rails was 10 feet long. We drawed water with a sweep and a pail. The well was in the yard. The mules for the slaves was in town. There were none on the plantation. They had 'em in town. They walked us time. What is this? Time the chicken crowded, and we went to work just as soon as we could see how to make a lick with a hoe. I guess these are analogies or idioms of the day. Very, very interesting terminology. So um, she's concentrated heavily on the labor of it all. Lord, you better not be caught with a book in your hand. And even to this day, there are many who says that if you want to hide it from the melanated person, put it in a book, right? And there's an injury. I talked about this many years in that space on both sides. If you did, you were sold. They didn't allow that. I can read a little, but I can't write. I went to school after slavery and learned to read. We didn't go to school but 3 or 4 weeks a year, and I learned to read. There was no church on the plantation, and we were not allowed to have prayer meetings. So this master sounds like a whole heathen, because there were some who feigned Christianity and thought that they had to teach their enslaved or to the degree of religion so that they would be goodly slaves. But this person, Covington here, Tom Covington, he sounds like a whole heathen. He sounds like a whole heathen. So now they don't have no prayer meetings. He's starving them. He's doing the absolute most. I'm gonna have to look this dude up. Not today though. No parties, no candy pullings, no dances, no sir, not a bit. I remember going one time to the white folks church. No baptizing that I remember. Lord have mercy. Ha ha. Nope. The patroller or the patty roller, aka the popo, I just put that in there. We're on the place at night. You couldn't travel without a pass. Where's your license? Same conversation. We got few possums. I have greased my daddy's back after he had been whooped until his back was cut to pieces. He had to work just the same. So when remember she said earlier that they made their living at night going out and procuring whatever that they could, whether it be from the bush or wherever they could get their sustenance from. And if these patty rollies or these patrollers would see you, then they would whip you. They had permission. And at this point, it would have been the other melanated so-called black slaves who are compelled by the owner to beat you, even though he knows the condition that you're in. And this consists or persists unto this day, right? We see it, but I'm gonna continue for the sake of time. Um, when we went to our houses at night, we cooked our supper at night and then went to bed. This also contributes to throwing off your, what is it called, circadian rhythm, throwing off how you sleep, how you process your health, essentially. If you're tiring yourself out through excessive work during the day, not eating sufficiently, and then eating late at night, right? That throws everything off. Uh, and some people still can't find that rhythm today. If fire was out or any work needed doing around the house, we had to work on Sundays. They did not give us Christmas or any other holiday. Yo, Tom Covington was a whole heathen. Oh my goodness, fam. We had corn because for them, Sunday, the significance was their Sabbath in many places in this Christian country. So for her to say that even on these religious holidays, they weren't allowed rest, this dude was a slave. Like he was the slave master of slave masters. We had corn shuckins. I heard them talking of cutting the corn pile right square in two. One would get one side, another on the other side, and see which outbeat. They had brandy at the corn shucking, and I heard Sam talking about getting drunk. This is another thing that I've read in these conversations is that some masters would encourage drinking to deal with the sorrows or the pain or the heaviness that came with being enslaved. So it's not surprising that she says here that they were given, what were they given? Brandy. Okay. I remember one woman dying. Her name was Caroline Covington. I didn't go to the grave, but they had a little cart used with horses to carry her to the grave. Just a one horse wagon. Just slipped her in there. Yes, I remember a field song. It was "Oh, come let us go, where pleasure never dies. Great fountain gone over." That that's one of them. We had a good doctor when we got sick. So she's just moving through this information, right? She's just again the way some people tell stories, it's just hitting different points. But she's not really, like I said, the most she's giving us is on the heaviness of the workload. She goes on to say, we had a good doctor when we got sick. He would come to see us. The slaves took herbs they found in the woods. That's what I do now, sir. I got some herbs right in my kitchen now. So just like how you have medical um, now insurance, there would be a slave doctor, a so-called slave midwife, those who the plantation owner would call upon to make sure the Negroes was in good health, right? When the Yankees come through, I did not know anything about them till they got there. And part of the reason that many people didn't know what was going on, as we see Juneteenth is coming up, I got my thoughts, but the part of the reason that a lot of people didn't know what was going on is that As the abolitionist movement picked up, the push against reading increased. And given that she was born 8 years before the war, this is where a lot of the laws became really stringent from the 1830s forward. After they voted to stop allowing the importation of new slaves and the abolitionist movement picked up, they did not want people to read because a lot of this information was being put in newspapers. A lot of the insurrection information was being put in books. And so they were afraid, the Europeans of the South were afraid that this was going to spoil their good Negroes, right? So there was a whole propaganda campaign, and there were laws against not only reading, those who taught people to read. The European teachers who were coming to the South, they would either be whipped, fined, jailed. They were really serious about hiding this information, kind of like what we're experiencing now to a certain degree, where there's this silencing that's coming because you don't want the people to know um, the truth about certain things. If we see the censorship that has happened in the last few years, it was something to that degree, but it wasn't against the internet. It was against reading, period, right? And so that's why she went into that. If you look at that time period, you'll see that a lot of those laws popped up during that time. But I'll continue. Um, just like they were popping up out the ground. One of the slaves was at his master's house, and he said, the Yankees are in Cheraw, South Carolina, and the Yankees are in town. It didn't strub me at all. Disturb her. I was not afraid of the Yankees. I remember they went to Miss Emma's house and went in the smokehouse and emptied every barrel of molasses right in the floor and scattered the cracklings on the floor. So again, this is a conversation that what we had last week of what was happening when the soldiers were coming in, how they would take some food, how they would destroy the food, because basically it was war. It was war. Am I? They killed the chickens, hogs too, and old Jeff the dog. They shot him through the throat. I remember how his mouth flew open when they shot him. One of them went into the tater bank, and we chillin' wanted to go out there. Mother wouldn't let us. She was afraid of him. Abraham Lincoln freed us by the help of the Lord, by his help. So this is the thought process. Again, all of the information that surrounded what was happening and why it was happening wasn't necessarily narrated to the people, so they just got bits and pieces of it. And in her understanding, it was Abraham Lincoln who helped free the slaves, right? Slavery was owing to who you were with. If you were with someone who was good and had some feelings for you, it did tolerate well. Yeah, tolerably well. So she's basically saying, depending on your slave master, is depending on the experience that you had. A lot of people in today's space and time does not want to admit that, but here it is right here for you in black and white. We left the plantation soon as the surrender. We left right off. So they was like, man, forget this. I'm not sticking around. I don't want to hear no song and dance. I'm out. We went to go towards Fayetteville, North Carolina. We climbed over fences and were just broke down, chilling, feet sore. We had a little meat cornmeal and a tray, and Mammy had a tin pan. One night we came to an old house. Someone had put wheat straw in it. We stayed there. Next morning, we came back home. Again, trying to at this point it's not escape, but leaving and not knowing where you're leaving or going to, not having any money, not having any connections, not having any knowledge of anything really going on outside of the plantation. A lot of people ended up going back, not to masters, but to a white woman named Peggy McClinton on her plantation. We stayed there a long time. The Yankees took everything they could, but they didn't give us anything to eat. They give some of the woman's shoes. I think Mr. Roosevelt is a fine man, and he do all he can for us. And that is her story. That's her story, remembering what she could from the mind of an 8-year-old and kind of just reflecting back on her experience. I think that's interesting, again, to note where some people, she doesn't mention the husband again. He was kind of like a footnote. Um, and really her experience is in the enslavement in and of itself. I kind of wanted to get a male's perspective. Let me see if I can. This is nothing but correction here. Let me come and see what you guys are saying over there. See if I can get a short one. This is another female, Martha. I kind of want to see. I notice when I read these things that the men, story of Joseph. Let me see what Joseph is over here dealing with. All right, Joseph, we're going. You up next. Let me see what's going on over here. Oopsie. Yeah, I'm not turned up today, you guys. A lot of times, like I said, the conversations that we continue to have in today's space and time are rooted. I don't know how many times I gotta say this, are rooted in the trauma that our foreparents experienced before. So we can just continue to grasp at straws, or we can dig to the root of the matter so we can examine it, deal with it, and flush it out. Right? It's not. It didn't begin now. Women picking the wrong men, men picking the wrong women, people's uh, intergenerational trauma comes from their specific family lineage issues. I don't know how clear I can make that. Unless what happens is we often talk about we or the community, and I say it as well, or black people, but black people, so called, and white people, and every other people are not a monolith, especially the collection of melanated people who came over here. I was reading and doing some research about Jamaica the other day, and what's the name of the book? I was reading a book of a man. Actually, it was his journal that he kept for the time that he left England and came to Jamaica. And it's not the first time I saw this conversation where they visited a place named Bath, and what they saw was the different people groups or the different tribes segregated, um, and at the location, and each doing that which was they were accustomed to in their land, right? So even though we were pulled over here and thrown together, the reality is it was different tribes, different people, different culture, different experiences. This is a fact. So when we're looking today and we keep having these conversations without emphasizing the need to assess our own personal family history, all we're doing is just spinning our wheels, man. What's going on? Yeah, this is a chill conversation, sis. You know I'm a wind down as the Shabbat approaches. We're spinning our wheels, and the reason I say that, I read the Bible continually, and there's some parts that speak to me, and I had to pause and really do this research. And one of them is when you bethink yourself in the land of your captivity and humble yourself and pray, right? There's another part that tells you the formula of return, as it tells you in Second Chronicles 7:14. There's a formula of return when the people find themselves in a position that they can't make head from tails. They can't get ahead. They don't know what's going on. And the answer lies in the experience of those who came before you. We have stepped into a storyline that already has been press play. It's like listening to Mary J. I'm Going Down, or Biggie Smalls, and not realizing that they're rapping over a sample that was actually a song aforetime. So imagine that when we were growing up, we're like, oh man, this is hot. And your parents are like, nah, give me a break. That's not that song. This is the actual original of the song. And that original of the song was inspired by something that came before. And so we'll be ignorant to think that these samples, and today, 20, 40 years later, it's a sample of a sample. And that's kind of how we're living our lives in today's space and time. And we keep having these redundant discussions and conversations without doing the work to say, where is this coming from so that I know how to proceed? We don't want to do that. I don't know why. But let's read Joseph Anderson, and then I'm going to ride down. Here goes Joseph. He tells us he's at 1113 Rankin Street, Wilmington, North Carolina. Any Andersons out there? See if your peoples come from here. This might be one of your ancestors. He may be giving you answers Why am I reading this? Because as somebody who does this work offline, some of these answers may give you the information that you need so that you could really understand why this particular thing happens throughout your family. And for your family, it's different than my family. I could tell you what's going on in my family, but it may not necessarily be what's going on in your family, right? But there's definitely a blueprint. Anywho, he says, yes, sir. Let me see who interviewed him. I was born a slave. I belonged to Mr. T.C. whoever McHenny, who had a big rice plantation, East Nest in Brunswick County. It was a big place. He had lots of slaves and he was a good man. So right away, he's telling a different story from um, the woman who we just read, right? My mother and father died when I was 14. Father died in February 1865, and mother died of pneumonia in November 1865. That's a hard hit, right? And 1865 is later on in that year is when the ending of the Civil War. My older sisters took charge of me. So we know he has an injury in this area. He's orphaned in the same year and liberated um, the people at large, right? Interviewer asks, can you read and write? Joseph, oh yes, I can write a little. I can make my marks. I can write my name. No, ma'am, I can't read. I never went to school a day in my life. I just picked up what I know. I don't remember much about slave times. I was 14 when I was freed. After I was freed, we lived between 8th and ninth on Chestnut. We rented a place from Dan O'Connor, a real estate man, and paid him $5 a month. So one would ask, bruh, right after slavery, where did you get $5? $5, it wasn't a little bit. It was nothing, a little bit of money at that time. So there's definitely a part of the story I feel like he's about to skip all the way over, but we'll continue. I've been married twice. First time was married to by Mr. Ed Taylor, magistrate in Southport, Brunswick County. I was married to my first wife 20 years and 8 months, and then she died. And he remembered the 8 months too. He said I was married again when I was 75. Dang, mister. What's his name again? 75. He was like, yo, not Joseph, I'm sorry. Joseph said, hey, I still got a little something in me. Joseph said he was married again at 75, and I was married to my second wife just a few years when she died. And so there's a lot of death that's going on around Joseph. Not sure how much he would have processed this situation, but he has a lot of death. His parents died, you know, um, his first wife died, his second wife died. He goes on to say, I was on the police force for a year and a half. I was elected April 6, 1895. Interesting that they allowed a melanated man to be on the police force at this time. Mr. Iheni was an old man then, and I used to go see him. So he went to go see the old master. I was stevedore, whatever that is, for Mr. Alexander Sprunt for 60 years. Joseph is now buying his house at 1113 Rankin Street, rents part of it for $8.50 a month to pay for it. He stays in one room. Joseph was industrious, and that's the end of Joseph's story. But how interesting is it? Um, Joseph's health is none too good, making information sketchy and incoherent. And that's a note. Joseph bought his own house, was a policeman in 1895, says he had a good master. He was over there doing real estate, collecting money, and staying in a little room. Joseph Anderson. Interesting, interesting, interesting. Again, everybody's experience is not the same. He said he had a good master, but his personal life was not the best. Eh? So that's what I have for you today. Maybe we'll come back at another time and take a look more over some of these stories. Why? I keep telling y'all why. But for those who just joined us, welcome to the conversation. Hopefully you got something from that and it kind of, put something extra in the pot. A little more than Willie Lynch, and a little more than the norm. I'm going to play a quick commercial, and then I'm going to see if anybody has anything else to say, and then I'm going to wind down. All right, all right, all right, all right, all right. So that's what we have today. Nothing too hype, nothing too over the top. You don't know it go already. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Leave your thoughts and suggestions down in the comment box below, and we'll come back at another time to continue on these type of discussions. All right, everybody have a blessed day. It doesn't want me to go. Like I pressed the end button like 3 times already. All right.